Welcome into the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel, your latest NFL draft betting update. We come to you in early April, missed out last week with the March Madness and not much to update. We are back, Brendan Glasheen, with two of our very best that cover the NFL draft at Action. We've got Luke Swain, Vegas Refund, Travis Reed. They're here every episode that will be joining you leading up to the draft. We're going to be here the next couple weeks. 3 weeks from Thursday is the first round, April 27th. So we'll be with you the next couple weeks, getting you set for, of course, updates, rumor mongering, but also how to bet the NFL draft. That is what we want to serve you here on the Action Network podcast. So, fellas, good to talk to you again. We didn't talk last week. I'll go to Luke first. Kind of what we did the first couple episodes, biggest changes from a rumor standpoint, a news standpoint, and you can go whatever direction you'd like, because it all somehow, free agency, it all connects to the draft in some capacity. So, Luke, the biggest piece of information that you think has shifted things since the last time we chatted on the pod?
At this point, we're kind of still waiting for the Cardinals to make the trade, which the closer we get, I think the less likely it is to happen before the draft. Like, I still think it's going to happen, but it's starting to trend towards like somewhat of a draft day trade, which normally when it's in the top 5, like those types of trades always happen before, where you would assume it's for a quarterback, where usually when we get into like the 10 plus range is when the draft day trades happen for non-QBs. So I don't think there's really any notable news, but you're starting to hear things about like what teams are going to be interested, what teams aren't interested anymore in terms of trading up for what everything that only matters in the top 10 are those 4 quarterbacks and who's going to be targeting them. So kind of just we're starting to form a consensus on what the first round is looking like, which could be a trap, might not. It's a unique year. So really nothing major, but just really starting to see it more clearly.
We will dive into new markets that are available in terms of how to bet the draft, position of the first pick by each team, position over unders, which is something we've teased in previous episodes. We haven't had a chance to really dive in. But with the draft approaching and getting closer, those markets are becoming available. So we can dive into some of the things Luke is sort of teasing at. And the quarterbacks is certainly a topic that we'll update every week. Trav, what's up? When you look now, last couple weeks, we haven't been on here, something that's caught your attention that you think is worth updating or that's newsworthy?
Well, I think the last time we talked about the Titans being a dark horse candidate to trade up, and that seems to have evolved into they're now one of the favorites to move up into that 3rd spot with Arizona. I think Luke mentioned it might be a draft day trade, and I think it's usually because we know the first 2 picks, and I'm not sure the first 2 teams, they have not at least given away their hand of which quarterbacks they're taking. So it might be that team waiting to see, okay, which quarterback's actually going to be there at 3 before they decide to pull the trigger on that move. But right now, the market's suggesting that it's a 2-horse race between Indianapolis and Tennessee to move up to that spot, which makes a lot of sense. So we'll see. I think that's kind of the biggest rumors right now. And kind of that Las Vegas has pulled out of that trade market. They seem to have cooled off and seem ready to go with Jimmy G for a year or maybe 2.
Yeah, and I think like the 3 teams that we're assuming are the trade up candidates are going to be, like Travis just said, the Colts, the Seahawks, and the Titans, where I think if it is the Colts or the Seahawks, that can definitely be a draft day type trade. Where the Titans, you would assume it has to be something before, because when you're moving up, like the Niners did, that's what everyone's comparing it to when the Niners traded up to number 3 for Trey Lance. I still think they traded up for Mac Jones and it turned into Trey Lance. But we really I still think it's going to happen. We're seeing some really drunk mocks on it not happening that I just don't totally buy yet. But yeah, I think it's definitely the Seahawks, Colts, or Titans.
Okay, we'll get to Mr. Jeremiah, who's become a podcast favorite now. The last, well, that's part of me. That wasn't Jeremiah. That was Zerline. Zerline's mock. We'll get
Yeah.
into.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dan Jeremiah. We'll catch you. We'll give you a break there.
No, do not shame the Jeremiah.
I'm not. I made a mistake. It wasn't him. It was Zerline. Zerline is mocked. We'll get to that. So let's circle back. So okay, you got some thoughts off your chest. We haven't been here for 2 weeks. So Luke, expand on Cardinals, because the Cardinals control a lot of this. If one of those teams, the Colts, the Seahawks, the Titans, if they are going to move up, well, the Cardinals sort of stand in the way, kind of. They're drafting third. They could go defense, and that opens the door for Indy to take a quarterback at 4 or do whatever. And the last time we were here, Mel Kiper had the report, or in his mock, Kiper is suggesting that the Colts would move to 3. Cardinals would trade back, and that would allow the Cardinals to still get their guy on defense despite not having to draft at 3. So as far as what you're expecting the Cardinals to do, do you think it's a high possibility that they're going to draft out of 3?
Yeah, I think it's where Will Anderson's over-under opened up, I want to say late last week, and the over-under opened up at 3.5, which is the Cardinals, and it was like juiced minus 115 on both sides. Where I immediately bet the over 3.5 on open at minus 115, and it currently sits, the over 3.5 currently sits at minus 500. So like these odds aren't like minus 500 doesn't mean that like they're giving it like an infinity chance to happen. But a lot of money came in on the over, and it just tells you what the perception is, that if the Cardinals don't trade, the under hits. But everyone is assuming to a minus 500 expectation that they are going to be trading, where like it really, the top 10 shakes out on whether 4 quarterbacks go in the top 4 or 3. Where we have, in the scenarios between the two are wildly different, because if 4 goes, guys like Will Anderson goes number 5, and then it could be Tyree, Jalen, and it just pushes everyone up that you expect to go maybe earlier based off of the mock drafts that you're seeing right now, because no one is making the trade in their mock drafts. And then the Cardinals don't trade out, or if they just trade with, let's say, the Seahawks, and they just, or not the Seahawks, the Colts, and they just swap, and 3 quarterbacks go, and Levis falls to the Titans, which would be amazing. The defensive players that we're expecting to go in the top 10 are going to go a pick earlier than you would assume. So it really is, the top 10 is very dependent on whether 4 quarterbacks go in the top 4 picks or not, which hopefully we'll find out soon. I think we will. We have to.
Well, what you mean is you're hoping a trade goes down that creates some clarity that a team is moving up to probably take a quarterback.
Yes, that would be great.
So I see your point. So you're using the Trey Lance example because that happened a few days before the draft or a week before?
No, I think it happened like a month.
A month? Yeah, you're right. Okay.
It was really far out. It was enough time for the Niners to change their mind, I think.
and for people like you guys to adjust your models and betting strategies accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Yep. So that's
Trey
what
Lance
need.
Was great.
So this needs to happen like now. Like come on, let's go. Because we're running out of time. Well, from that perspective.
Yeah, we got 3 weeks. We got plenty of time.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, we'll see. You never know. I mean, hey, the number 1 pick got traded on like a Friday at 5:00. They buried that going into a weekend. So, Travis, when you look at just the Cardinals, trying to figure out what they might do. Anderson, they're connected to Jalen Carter potentially, who is saying he won't take interviews outside the top 10, which to Luke's point, that could change if a team trades in like a Tennessee. But if the Titans do trade in, they're going to want to probably take a quarterback, not a defensive player. What's your latest development on the Cardinals and their trade expectations?
Yeah, I think they want to get out of that spot. There's obviously, if there's multiple teams wanting to get to your spot and you're not one player away, it's to your advantage to get out of there. And I think this is a lot like the Chicago situation. We're all expecting a trade. We're just waiting for the details to happen. We don't know which team. We didn't know it was going to be Carolina that traded up to 1, but we were all pretty sure that Chicago was going to trade it. It's the same thing here. We're all pretty sure Arizona's going to trade the 3 pick. We just don't know which team is moving up. So much like we had that clarity once Carolina traded up to 1, we're like, okay, they're going quarterback 1. We're pretty sure Houston's going 2. We're waiting for that same clarity once they drop that trade for number 3. And that'll kind of have that cascading effect that Luke was talking about. Okay, now we can start to slot in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and everything looks a lot better. Right now, there's kind of this if-then built in, whereas, okay, if they don't trade it, now, it's probably Will Anderson at 3, then what happens? So if we can get that trade in, it clears out a lot of those what if scenarios and really starts to kind of solidify what we're expecting in that top 10 picks.
Luke, do you see an angle or any value in Jalen Carter plus 800 first defensive player if the Cardinals trade out of 3? And, well, is there a scenario in which they wouldn't take Anderson in a different slot, 3, 4, or 5, if they trade out of 3?
I do not see any value there. The under 7.5 is something that I've been very interested in, and I just can't stop looking at it. Where one guy I mention a lot is Rob Statton, who is a Seahawks expert, who runs like a Seahawks blog. And if he didn't have such a strong opinion on the Seahawks not taking Jalen Carter, I probably would be involved in the under 7.5, but no, like Jalen Carter just there's too many questions. There was a rumor that the Raiders came out and took him off his board, but then the Raiders backtracked and said they didn't. And then you're saying he's not taking interviews with teams outside the top 10. And then Jeremiah went on air yesterday saying that he doesn't see them getting past the Eagles at all whatsoever, which they sit at 10. He is, if there wasn't for these character concerns, etc., then yes, I would see value. But it's pretty much a stone cold lock for Anderson to be the first guy taken. Whether it's at 4 or 5 is what we need to figure out. Because if Anderson goes 4, guys like Jalen and Tyree are going to go 5, 6, let's just say. And then, but if Anderson trades with the Seahawks and Anderson goes 5, then guys like Tyree could make it to the Falcons. So yeah, no, I do not see any value to answer your question.
So you said that what's staring you in the face is under 7.5. And as of now, that would be Seattle at 5, Detroit at 6, Vegas at 7. Those are all, those all make a ton of sense, right? Especially you put Carter with Aiden Hutchinson. That's a pretty daunting.
Yeah, he's a perfect fit for the Lions or the Seahawks. But when the only concern is character, and it is something that you can't tangibly measure and is a very case-by-case basis on what a team's principles are, it's just something I don't want to get involved with. It is something that is so unpredictable that you have no idea, that there's not like information you can get on. Where characters is just something that you can't. It's just find another angle on someone else, because he could slip to the Eagles. He could go 4. He could go anywhere. And of course it's 7.5, which pick 7 is the Raiders, who you heard took him off their board, even though he's there right now in a meeting. So
I'm not sure what the Raiders want to do at all. Like now they won't move up. Now they might stand pat. I'm not sure as to what they're gunning for here. Like,
I think they're going best available. Vic Tarfor, I butchered his last name. He's probably one of the most plugged in beat writers out of all the teams, and he had a great piece on The Athletic after owners meetings. And McDaniels actually came out and has a quote that they truly believe in taking the best player available, unless they have a guy tied on their big board. Then they'll draft for need and just default to the guy based off of need. But McDaniel said they're going to take the best player available, which that's when you go and you look at the experts that you trust big boards and take a consensus, which for me, it's going to be either Tyree or one of two, Christian Gonzalez or Witherspoon, the Raiders should end up with.
Travis, you got a Jalen Carter thought before we move on?
Yeah, so Luke said it's kind of hard to nail down, and I agree, but I do think that number's at 7.5. I think the team at 8 at Falcons is interesting, especially when you look at the market of which team will draft him. FanDuel has the Falcons at 6-1, but if you shop around, you can find that at 9-1. So I think that's an interesting angle. If he does, especially with that report, if Seattle isn't going to take him at 5, and then you do see like Tyree go 6, and then the corners go, to 7, I could see him landing there at 8 and at 9-1. I think that's a solid price because I think we're all pretty confident he's going to be in that 5 to 10 range. So to get one of those teams at 9-1 odds, I think that's a good bet.
But that would be the 9-1 would be specific team defensive line, right? Not first defensive player taken.
Right. It's Falcons to take Jalen Carter.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
okay.
9. Got it. Yep. Yeah,
And
that is on FanDuel.
And just looking at the other market available at FanDuel, position of Atlanta Falcons first drafted player, defensive line plus 100, even money.
Right. It's even money. So all you're doing is taking one of the best defensive linemen at 9-1 odds. That's kind of screaming value to me.
Right. Exactly. So when you correlate those two, that
It's
makes a lot of sense.
Which would be either Tyree or Jalen Carter.
Right.
Okay, let's move on. One of the notes you had in here, Luke, that you wanted to hit on, just some notable pro days. Is that quarterback related, or is there a pro day in particular that jumped out to you the last couple of weeks?
So this week there's one. So Miles Murphy, who's been a guy that since we started recording, I've thought was going to fall to the late first round, which in January he was getting mocked in the top 10. And you could see that he was going to start to fall in terms of like momentum, and he did. And you can see him all the way into the late 20s in some mocks, but he crushed his pro day on Tuesday. Like everything except for his vertical was like elite. And that is the type of thing that can bring him all the way back down into like top 10. I've seen Packers at 15, very trendy. So I'm not sure that the 20s is realistic anymore. I think he's going to go where everyone thought he should have gone back in January. So that's something to look out for in terms of over-unders, et cetera. A guy that's going to regain momentum, because momentum in April is all that matters, where the pro days that are closest to the draft are the ones that matter the most, because you got all that hype, you got all the momentum going into the draft. So that is one worth noting. And then today, probably as we speak, Witherspoon out of Illinois. Yep. His pro day is probably one of the more important pro days that will happen. He hasn't tested yet. He didn't do anything at the combine because he was injured. But if he runs his 40 today, which I don't think he's going to, but there is a chance, and he crushes it, that catapults him into the top 10 range and maybe over, and could just put him as a consensus over Gonzalez, which I have a Witherspoon to be the first corner ticket from a while back. But if he doesn't run it, then it's going to be tough because he wouldn't have done anything. And it's going to be everything based off tape. So look out for reports coming out of his pro day, which happens today, which is Wednesday.
I think it's happening like right now as we speak. And I think he's running his 40. I think that is happening.
That would be great. And we talked about, you can't screw, it's so hard to screw up a pro day. So like, I'm expecting him to run a phenomenal 40. So unless you're Kyle Hamilton is the only guy I think I've ever heard of that has blown his pro day, which last year, Kyle Hamilton, the safety from Notre Dame, consensus top 10 pick, runs his 40 at his pro day. He runs like a high 4.7. And then all of a sudden he falls out of the top 10, and the Ravens got him, I think, like pick 14, which was a steal. He's the only guy I've ever heard of blowing his pro day. So
it's easy to drink the Kool-Aid, though, after the pro days, see Josh McCown and what his conversation was like with CJ Stroud, and talking about how they will find a spot for him where he's going to rent out in Charlotte. And that created chaos.
Play horse.
Yeah, that's right. We'll get to quarterbacks in a second. Travis, any we'll get to QBs, but any other pro days that kind of jumped out to you, whether happening now or in recent weeks, that may have caught your attention from a betting perspective?
Yeah, the only one that really did was Israel Abanikanda from Pittsburgh, but I don't think there's anything we can bet on yet because he's going to be a day 2 type guy. But if we do see, after that day 1 market, who's going to be that like third running back after Gibbs, I think he launched himself into that conversation, just had a outstanding spark score and basically just nailed it. So I think he kind of becomes an interesting name on day 2, but I think Luke already nailed the other ones for the day 1 guys.
All right, let's move on to quarterback palooza. We'll get to a couple things here. We'll start with, and we talked Titans a little bit off the top, but I want to kind of hammer this and pick it apart. Daniel Jeremiah, friend of the podcast, we think. Move the Sticks podcast. He says, can I give you a team that I have been told to keep an eye on that's exploring this and looking into this? Again, this is just people around the league, says Jeremiah. Don't sleep on numero 11, the Tennesse Titans, the 2 teams to keep an eye on with the trade-ups are the Raiders and the Titans. So the Titans moving from 11 to then move up. And then the possibility would be take quarterback in the draft. Luke, when we talked, and I know we talked about this a little bit in terms of the timing, Trey Lance timing, we thought possibly Mac Jones, but just the Niners making that move to give us plenty of time. I'm curious as to how this relates to the number of first-round quarterbacks we might see, and that could also tie in Hendon Hooker. He's getting some round 1 quarterback hype as well. He's being tied into visiting some teams, and there's some smoke around him possibly going first round. I'm curious about quarterbacks taken first round. I know you said 4 in the top 10, which would create clarity for other positions, but just QB generally speaking, Titans moving up, Hendon Hooker hype, and then we'll get into Young and Stroud in a second.
So the Titans moving up, if that happens and they take a quarterback, like I will be like, I got very invested in that. Titans to take a quarterback, specifically to Levis, Richardson, which would be phenomenal for myself. But I'm losing a little bit of faith because the amount it would cost for them to move up is going to be a lot. Where for me, like the scenarios that I can see them taking a quarterback at this point, they don't go 2-3 would be Levis falling. If you're Zerline, Richardson falling, or in one that just isn't being talked about it at all is if one of the 4 quarterbacks falls to a pick like the Lions at 6, like the Titans going from 11 to 6 would cost a lot less. And I can see being a lot more realistic for a team like the Lions who have 2 first-round picks that it would make a lot of sense for. But yeah, and this is why like the Patriots taking Mac Jones to me never really made sense. And Brendan, I know you're a Patriots fan, you're gonna love this, but like if you're drafting your franchise quarterback, you either trade up to go get him, or you have a top 5 pick and you take him there. If you just are hoping that this quarterback falls to you and then you draft him, to me, that's not like you truly believe he is your franchise. You either go get him or you have a top pick. So the Patriots just let Mac Jones fall to him and let the Bears leapfrog them to get Fields. So I think trade is very realistic for the Titans. I think it's the most realistic if a guy falls and they trade up to like the Lions, etc. And then the Hendon Hooker, I just don't buy. Right now, like the over has gotten destroyed to a point where it is very bettable. Hendon Hooker, great, but if you look, he is a quarterback coming out of a spread system, the torn ACL that is 25 years old. Every year around this time, there is a quarterback that is starting to get hyped by the media because they have nothing else to talk about, that they say they wouldn't be surprised if this guy sneaks in, and he never does. Last year was Desmond Ridder. He went in like the 2nd or 3rd. You got Davis Mills goes in the 4th. Like the list goes on. I think I tweeted about it last week. But to me right now, it's just hype. I don't see him. Like Hendon Hooker could be Like it could be different, but if you base it off of history, none of these quarterbacks that were getting hyped are 25 years old off of an ACL, etc. Which the Vikings are the team everyone's trending towards. Titans, maybe Patriots, but I don't buy it at all. I would bet the under 4.5. I wouldn't bet the over unless it was like really fun odds.
Matt Miller, ESPN NFL draft analyst, tweets yesterday, April 4th. We record to you on a Wednesday, April 5th. Tennessee quarterback Hendon Hooker met with the Saints today as the Titans and Packers to close out this week. His schedule is packed pre-draft with visits. Does he go first round? ? Starting to think so. That's Matt Miller and how he
those teams can draft him in the second round too. Just an FYI.
Matt Miller.
It's just they're running out of things to talk about until we get a little bit closer. We're in like a window of you don't want to put out there's enough time to put out 2 mock drafts, but not enough time to put out 3. And then we got pro days are starting to dwindle, where these are the types of things that I just don't buy it.
Oh, and by the way, I meant to respond to what you said about the Mac Jones thing just really quickly. In certain, I agree with you in the Patriots situation. In some team situations like the Colts and how they've handled this position post Andrew Luck, they're probably thinking, well, to save face in our front office, to save face for our new head coach, well, we could just, I'm talking like I'm the Colts. Well, we had the 4th pick. We had to take what was best available to us. So it almost buys them time. Not saying that's right for the football operation, but the idea of buying time because we had to get the next best quarterback available. What could we have possibly done?
Fair. And the last thing I wanted to talk about,
but that's not football. That's just trying to save people's jobs. That's not like trying to be a good team. Anyway, keep going.
No, I get it. I totally get it. And last thing I wanted the Titans with the coaches meetings last week, Vrabel had an interview, which the buildup was insane and hilarious, but they were asking about Tannehill. And he goes on for like a minute or two about Tannehill, where you think he's going to commit to him. And then at the very end, he just doesn't. And I was like, oh God, this isn't good for like the Titans quarterback odds. And then he just doesn't commit to Tannehill. And he says, basically saying like, whoever is going to be on a roster will have confidence in him, etc. Which at that point I was like, okay, maybe I should go bet more on Titans quarterback. But it was like 2 minutes of losing faith. And then the last 15 seconds, you're like, holy shit, he didn't commit to Tannehill, because they can save a ton of money by not having him on the roster.
Yeah. Sorry. Travis, weigh in, please, on the latest. We'll get to Stroud and Young in a second here, but just the conversation surrounding the Titans moving up. Jeremiah's got a report coming in that the Titans can move up from 11, and then Hendon Hooker. And if you do have an angle on how to play the quarterback market from a betting perspective, I will add Tennesse Titans, position of team's first draft pick. It goes O-line and then quarterback at plus 125 for the Titans.
Which it was
as of right now.
It was plus 1,600 a couple weeks ago.
Wow. Okay. Go ahead, Trav.
Yeah. I do think there's one wild card here, and that's Lamar Jackson that we haven't mentioned, who could throw a wrench into a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because there have been some rumors to Indy for him, and obviously that pick would go to Baltimore. Now, does Baltimore draft the quarterback that Indy would have drafted anyway? Maybe. I think Anthony Richardson would make a lot of sense just to step into the Lamar role and just keep doing your running quarterback offense. But yeah, Tennessee has not committed to Tannehill. They drafted Malik Willis last year. He is not any good, but that's obviously not a good sign for Tannehill. So I do think, I think quarterback makes a ton of sense for them in a lot of ways. But yeah, are they willing to pay that price? Because it's going to be not just this year's first, it's probably next year's draft picks. And so are you really confident one of these guys to kind of mortgage this year and next year and really kind of put the coaching and the GM, they probably don't have a lot of rope left. They kind of got to that mountaintop and got the 1 seed, had like their little run there, got to AFC Championship, and never really. And now it seems like they're on their way down. And so, really, are they going to just push all their chips in and see like, okay, we're going to try for one of these young quarterbacks and hope he can get us back there?
The latest on Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, number 1 pick. We spent a lot of time on this in previous episodes, and because there's just a lot of news around it. The quarterbacks, they already had their pro days. Stroud had Panthers ownership there last week chatted, but the betting market, and looking at FanDuel right now, it's Stroud. What they think. Stroud minus 300, number 1 overall pick. Bryce Young plus 250. But Luke, there is some Bryce Young love coming in. Zerline's got a mock out now we'll get to the other stuff in the mock, but Young is going number 1 in Zerline's latest mock draft to Carolina. Your thoughts, and is there a chance that we might need to take a look at Bryce Young at plus 250 to be number 1?
No, I mean, it's just not. I mean, I guess if you don't have any number 1 tickets and you just want to have some action on the number 1 pick, like, sure. But if you have Stroud tickets, I wouldn't be hedging. With Bryce Young, I think Jeremiah came out on Path of the Draft last night saying he would be utterly shocked if the Texans didn't take a quarterback at number 2, which was like the hottest angle of Zerline's mock yesterday, which I don't know if we're getting into that now, because I just have a few thoughts about it because it was phenomenal.
Well, it all relates because he's got Young going number 1 in his mock. So go ahead.
Yeah, and the one thing with Zerline is we've talked about how like there's specific mockers that are connected to teams, and the team, and I love Zerline. He's like one of my favorites, but the team he's connected to is the Texans, which is why I didn't close the mock out the second I opened it, where it was like he was taking it to his grave that he wasn't trying to make a mock that would get attention or clicks. But at the same time, I think he replied to every single reply that he got on his mock draft on Twitter. So, which it was great. It was absolutely crazy. But there is a groupthink consensus right now that I think could be a little bit more dangerous this year compared to other years, because it's generally thought that this class is weaker than other years. And like the 5, 6, 7 pick this year isn't like years past 5, 6, 7, where normally it's, if you have 5 through 7, this guy's the best of the 5. He's going to go 5, and it's just going to go like those guys are going to go in that order. Where this year it's just a little bit more closer because this crop isn't as good. Where one team could have the 5th player at the bottom of their board, and another team could have them at the top. So there's just a lot more uncertainty, which again creates chaos, which is great. But the group thing could be a little bit more dangerous, which is why I appreciated Zerline's. I don't take it totally serious, but there needed to be a little bit of a shakeup in terms of what the consensus was amongst the mock, because it was getting somewhat copycat.
So you're kind of making fun of it, but also supporting it.
I'm, yeah, pretty much. Like I'm not like there was nothing I bet off of his mock at all, but it was good to like refresh it, like just like refresh, like okay. You have to take a step back and say like, okay, things can go off the rails. If it does, it could be this year. And like, that kind of just like reminded me, I guess you could say, he had Tyree Wilson going 2nd, which was the Texans. He had, it was, which
I got it right here. Will Anderson 3rd to Arizona. He's got CJ Stroud going 4th to Baltimore. The Ravens traded to 4.
Tyree 2nd. So Texans not taking quarterback.
Right. So Young, Wilson, then Anderson to the Cardinals at 3, and then CJ Stroud at 4 to Baltimore.
And Richardson 14 to the Patriots, like, which I'm all for that. Like, let's go. But yeah, if his mock happens, we're losing a lot of money. Let's just put it that way. At least I am. But I don't think it will. Not a lot. Whatever.
For our listeners, Lance Zerline 2023 NFL mock, his mock draft 3.0. It came out just this week, so that's what we're referencing.
And McShay came out of the mock yesterday too, which I'm a huge McShay fan. I love him. It was kind of underwhelming because I read the context.
This one's way more interesting.
Yeah, I read into the context a lot of the mocks, and it seemed like he didn't have any information in this mock. Like it was kind of just his opinion, which you love, like, he does, like, quote unquote, like, I'm hearing, etc. Like, there was not a lot of I'm hearing in the context of his mock, which disappointing, but it's okay. Still got
Travis, CJ Stroud, Bryce Young. If you have a Stroud ticket at close to even money, when I mean that was it's about even the minute the deal went down when Carolina traded up to number one. What would you do with the current market of Stroud minus 300, Young plus 250?
I'm the same as Luke. I'm just sitting on the Stroud ticket. Don't need to hedge yet. If that number gets bigger, especially if we get closer and you want to just hedge out a little bit, that's fine. But for now, I'm sticking with it. Yeah, that Zerline mock did open some eyes. But yeah, it's kind of like when somebody makes a crazy March Madness bracket, you're like, I'm not going to go with that, but I respect that you're trying to go for it. But yeah, the interesting thing is I have seen what if Young doesn't go second? What if Richardson goes second? And Luke mentioned the group think, there's a chance that Richardson does go second. We're kind of just dismissing that. So I think those types of things are interesting. If you want to bet like Bryce Young to go third or fourth, there's some long odds there. But if you made me pick right now, I'm still going to go Stroud 1, Young 2, and then we wait on the trade at 3.
Yeah, because there's an angle with Stroud not going number 2 because he has the same agent as Deshaun, which people are galaxy braining that the Texans won't want Stroud because of his agent, because there's so much tension between Deshaun and the Texans from the past that Stroud has the same agent. I don't buy that, but I mean, if they're making decisions off of things like that, then they got a problem in itself. But yeah.
Every client is their own individual person.
And I do want to just quick thought. So Witherspoon just ran his 40. And it looks like he ran a 4.42 and a 4.46. And I quote the man of the hour, Daniel Jeremiah, quote unquote, that'll work. So Witherspoon is very much in play for top 10. Yeah. Which I love. I think Lions, Raiders, Falcons, 6, 7, 8 are very much in play at this point because he hadn't tested yet. And the fact that he just ran a low 4.4 is great. And I don't even think he's 100%. So in terms of health, so he ran a low 4.4, not 100%. Sign me up.
All right. Well, that's something we can definitely dive into deeper next week. But before we go, so there's your quarterback update. A lot of going on, a lot of chatter, which is good for our purposes. But from a betting perspective, it sounds like don't overreact to the Hendon Hooker hype. And for the most part, and it relates, it's not, see, I know that when you consume podcasts, folks, about the draft, a lot of it is made about the quarterbacks, but it also, as the guys said off the top, it relates to how you want to bet defensive positions as well for the teams like the Cardinals and the Falcons and possibly the Seahawks. Like it all kind of connects in that way based on the over-under kind of place. So speaking of which, and we've intertwined these throughout today's show, but before we get out of here, and also you guys are going to give out a couple picks before we get out. Any new markets that you guys are eyeing since the last podcast? Luke, you first. Any new markets that you want to tell the listener to explore?
So there's a bunch. The ones that I've gotten the most involved with, which it's really kind of just the over-unders not fully coming out and I guess needing some action on the draft, is team to draft position first, which FanDuel put up a ton. DraftKings has a ton. Caesars has a ton now, where I got involved in a lot of the early numbers. There still are a few, but those, if you can, which again, whether quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3, 4 is really what hinders at least the top 10 in terms of position. But there's a bunch on there. You got positional over-unders available. You got college conference over-unders available. We had a first linebacker come out, which I was surprised Drew Sanders wasn't the favorite. Jack Campbell out of Iowa actually opened as the favorite, but if neither of them go in the first round, it really gets dicey. And that's when like fits come in, and linebacker is a interesting, not premium position. So I'm not interested in first linebacker. They even have a matchup on DraftKings, which they're tied. What else came out? Michael Mayer on FanDuel came out, which that was a bad line that they opened up, and they opened up Lions at 34-1, which off of the mocks that I track, Michael Mayer to the Lions is the highest percentage, which is 20, which is 5% higher than any other player going to the Lions at 18. Now, I've had many friends respond saying, is plus 5,000 Titans to pick a tight end a better bet? And the answer is no, because they have 2 picks, and that bet is for the number 6 pick. So if you're seeing the Michael Mayer odds and you think that the positional odds are better, those positional odds are for the number 6 pick, not the number 18 pick, which would be the Michael Mayer, which came out at 34-1, which I bet it's come down. I still think they should be the favorite. It's not like my bet for this pod, but it is a fun one. And then they opened up first kicker. What's his name? What's the kicker's name? Did you see that, Travis?
Yeah, it was Jake Moody. I saw that on the notes, and I said, "Who the hell is Jake Moody?"
Yeah, which is like DraftKings just teasing us. It's like we want more over unders, and they put out Jake Moody last night, which was, I mean, I don't have any thoughts on a kicker, but I did have a friend say he bet Jake Moody to the Bears at 100-1. So I was like, whatever. So I think I put like $10 on it. At 100-1, Jake Moody to the Bears. Again, we just want the over-unders, but I think that's a update on. Did I miss anything on what's come out?
No, I think you got everything.
Cool.
Trav, anything that you're well, go ahead, Luke. You got something else?
In number 4 and number 5 pick came out too. That is very interesting to me, because it's priced out somewhat to the extent that they think that the Cardinals are going to pick at 3 and Will Anderson at 4 and Will Anderson at 5. I don't see him getting past 5 at all. If you bet both of them, kind of are guaranteeing yourself a profit. I think it's plus 225 to go 4th, and then like plus 165 to go 5th, which I don't see him. And like the only way you don't make money off of those 2 bets combined is if Zerline was correct, which I don't think he is.
Travis, any markets that have jumped out to you that are new in the last couple weeks, or ones that you're keeping an eye on or eyeing?
Yeah, I like the the team positional ones are good because you don't have to nail the player exactly. You just have to nail the team need. So those are ones that I do like, especially in the back half of the draft, because there is, this effect of, well, if one team just reaches here, it could set off a chain of events. But if you can nail the team's needs and the mocks are agreeing with those team needs and you can get some value there, those are the ones that are probably the best to go after, that are of the new ones. Like Luke said, we're still waiting on the over-unders. Hopefully those come soon.
I'm trying to remember now during the pod when you mentioned we were agreeing that you got a better number. Why am I forgetting what we were talking about? Did we talk about
it was, Jalen Carter to the Falcons?
Yes. So defensive lineman is plus 100. So that's also just a good market to use as a guide, right? Like just to use as a way to gauge other bets you might want to make.
Yeah. And there's a lot of instances where you should shop around and look at different, it's not even shopping the same market. It's, if this happens, this market is good. Like for example, we talked about, what if Richardson goes second? Well, he's 16-1 to go second. But if you think that means Young goes third, he's 25-1 to go third. So if you think those 3 are the picks, you'd be better off betting the 25-1 Young going third than Richardson going second. Because if Richardson goes second, you're probably hitting that 25-1.
NFL draft is 3 weeks from tomorrow, April 6th. Tomorrow, 27th is when the first round is. So we're getting close, fellas. We haven't given out a ton as far as picks and actionable stuff. I mean, we give out plenty of actionable content, but actual picks that you guys might want to get on now. We'll go to Luke first and then Travis before we get out of here. Luke, anything you want to bet or give out now before we leave today?
So giving out actually a couple already on this show. So for someone who skips forward to the end, no soup for you. But
that is true. You actually have weaved in some things you do like during the show today.
Yeah.
That is a good point. But just, kind of to put a wrapper on it, come on.
Yeah. So there's one I do like, and it's going to be a positional where it's somewhat of a planting my red flag on this, where the one I do like at its current odds are Eagles position to be drafted first, which is on FanDuel. It's on all the books. And I very much like offensive line at plus 400, plus 380, either or works. Where right now the trendy pick is Lucas Van Ness or maybe a corner, where I just don't totally buy that for reasons that if you look into their beat writers, Jimmy Kopensky, who's one of my favorite like diamonds in the rough, Eagles for the Philly Inquirer, has come out with a couple pieces lately about team needs, big board, etc. After the owners' meetings that he was at, and offensive line, he has made great arguments for. And the Eagles are going to be a team that is the most analytically driven and they always draft the premium positions in the first round. They never take linebackers. They never take running backs. There could be an exception with Bijan, but I don't buy that totally. And the Eagles have their center, Kelsey, and Lane Johnson at right tackle, who have 1 year left, maybe 2. And the Eagles have always had depth, and they've lost a few guys. And right now, Paris Johnson is trending to go 9 to the Bears, which leaves Skoronski and Broderick Jones, which I could see either of them going here. But Skoronski is the perfect pick for number 10 because Kopensky mentioned how drafting a lineman that is versatile, who they can just put at guard from day one and then move to right tackle when Lane Johnson leaves, or maybe even center, and Skoronski is exactly that. His arms are a little bit shorter, so everyone is making the point that he is not a left tackle and they think he might fall, which is why Paris Johnson might go ahead of him. Where Skoronski is that they guard the tackle who knows even the center, and it is exactly the type of pick I can see the Eagles taking and needing at 10. And Skoronski is he is power ranking, big boards. He is top 5 on every team, but based off of the arms and et cetera and guard, he's going to slip. And every bet that I make, I want at least 2 or 3 options where I was very interested in like the Falcons and the Raiders, or like their positional odds interest me, where corner is interesting and defensive line for the Falcons at 7, which defensive line's plus 400, corners plus 250. But with the defensive line, you're really kind of just betting on Tyree falling, which is one option. Where at 10, we could have 3 tackles for the Eagle to pick between, which I buy. Corner, I don't think is as big of a need anymore. So yeah, Eagles first position, offensive line plus 400.
Love it. I like it. And that, with Kelsey probably playing his last season, they're getting older. Could shore that up for a young quarterback on a rookie deal. So go out and continue to grow the offensive line and keep things going for Jalen Hurts. I like it at the top of the draft. Travis, anything that you'd like to give out at the end of the show before we say goodbye?
Yeah, the Carter to the Falcons at 9-1 again. Another one, I think I've given this out before, but I'm still kind of piling in. Jackson Smith and Jigba, first receiver. He's still minus 200. I still think that's too short. I think he's clearly in a tier above those other guys. Most of the question marks around his health and everything have been answered. There's just like all of the Ohio State players and everything like that. Like Garrett Wilson came out and said he's better than I was. There's just a lot of good rhetoric towards him. So I think he's clearly going to be the top receiver in this draft. And I think minus 200 is fine to lay that.
Where do you suspect he goes?
Probably in that 11-12 range. A lot of that depend if the Titans don't trade up for a quarterback, right. They clearly need receivers. I think
those odds are 10-1. Titans to take a wide receiver is 10-1, which that would mean they're taking a wide receiver in the first round 2 years in a row, which would be crazy, but I'm seeing it and I do buy it too.
Yeah. That's one of those things where as soon as a trade happens, like say the Colts do make a trade or something, run to go bet that. Because if they're not trading up for a quarterback, receiver's going to be one of their best needs, that and tackle. But yeah, I think he's going to be in that, 10 to 15 range. And I think he's going to clearly be ahead of those other guys.
There is a specific book, a big book that has him at minus 175 for his receiver taken too. And I think, what was it? Who's the Ohio State wide receivers coach? Used to be the Dolphins wide receiver.
Hartline, right?
Hartline had an interview earlier this week, and he listed his top 5 receivers he's coached, and he put Marvin Harrison number 1, and he had Jackson number 2. And then I think he went Garrett, Terry, Olave, which to me, maybe I buy it, but you're not going to put a guy in his draft process any lower than number 2, and you're also going to put a guy who's playing for you number 1, which Marvin is number 1. And it just felt like he wasn't trying to hurt anyone's feelings, and the Ohio State is wide receiver U, and everyone's pumping them, which I would pump my guys too. But I think I agree with Travis, which minus 175, hell yeah, minus 200. Yeah.
If Tennessee moves up, I mean, maybe there is some appeal for Houston to take a receiver, and then Patriots are meeting with Zay Flowers, the BC kid. Of course they are. Just because that's just easy for Bill to go right down. Down the road.
Please no.
Yeah. Okay. Very good, fellas. Good stuff. This was fun. We're back off and running. We have 3 weeks to go until the draft, so we'll be with you next week and the week after that. And the week after that. So the 12th, 19th, 26th, we will be giving you NFL draft betting updates leading up to the first round, which is again Thursday, April 27th from Kansas City, Missouri. For Luke Swain, Travis Reed, Brendan Glasheen. As a reminder, if you're looking for other sports betting content at Action Network on the podcast side, our UFC betting preview comes your way on Friday morning. And if you're into baseball season is back. It is underway. You can tune into Payoff Pitch. We are live every Monday. We're not live. We record episodes every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. 3 episodes a week if you're into baseball. Check that out. Payoff Pitch, Action Network's MLB betting podcast. For Luke, Travis, Brendan Glasheen, thanks for tuning in to the Action Network podcast presented by FanDuel. Talk to you again next week.